I want to start by saying that I don't have the best relationship with my mom. I have an older sister, and growing up my mom always tended to control me and tried to override any decisions I make, saying that I was young and naive and she always knew better. I cut contact with her for a few months after she tried to get involved in my marriage. My husband and I've been together for 3 years, and he has always been telling me to be more gentle with my mom. I had a miscarriage a few days ago. It's devastating and I really thought it'll get easier, but I'm still feeling excruciating pain and frustration. We were happy and excited, but all that disappeared suddenly, and it was hard for me to take because I thought everything was fine. I didn't tell anyone, especially since I'm currently dealing with some health issues. I didn't tell anyone in the family. My husband promised not to tell until I'm ready. My mom kept asking me questions and brought up my pregnancy constantly, and my answers were short. Because I didn't want her to know, since she'd call everybody and let them know. She's always like this, that's why I tend to keep things private. I decided to not visit for a couple of days, hoping she'd stop asking questions. Then I found out on FB that my mom announced my miscarriage on her page, and I didn't know about that. I was shocked. I freaked out when I started getting calls from family members, and I have no idea how many people knew about it. I was so mad to the point of shaking. Everyone kept berating me for not telling them. I called my mom and I yelled at her. She defended herself, saying that she was just looking for support and that I should have told her about it first time she asked what was wrong. I asked her who told her, and she said she had a talk with my doctor, but I shouldn't be mad because she's my mom and she had the right to know what's going on. I argued with her about getting involved in my personal life and disregarding my feelings and cutting me off guard like that. I went to the doctor and I lashed out at her for releasing my private medical information to my mom and causing me to deal with everyone asking why I was hiding my miscarriage from them, even though I was just waiting for the right time. I told my doctor that I was going to file a complaint against her the same day, since she didn't respect my privacy, and decided to give my mom information about my medical records. My mom heard and started berating me, saying it wasn't the doctor's fault and that she was a friend of hers she knew years ago, but I didn't know about it. She said that I went too far and acted like my family were strangers. She said that she's my mom and I didn't need to overreact like that. All I needed was time and space. Now I have to deal with all this stress and I'm a mess right now. My brother texted me a few minutes ago and said he wants to come over and talk to me. He was the first to call me and berated me and said that I was being hostile towards everyone for no reason. I haven't replied to his text yet, but I don't want to see anyone right now. I can't take one more word from them. Recently, my cousin and cousin-in-law have been thinking about relocating to our state because of recent job opportunities, and we've hosted them in the past when they visited. The first time they stayed with us, before my son was born. My nephew seemed to develop a strong attachment to my wife and always wanted to be near her. He drew a picture of a heart and picked some flowers from our yard and gave them to her before they left, saying he loved her. My wife thought this was sweet and gently handled his crush by telling him she would always love him as his aunt. But she was sure he would find another girl to fill his heart soon. He told her no, she was his girlfriend. This weekend, they were staying with us again, and my nephew again wanted to be near my wife every chance he got. His mom and dad noticed and told him that because my wife now had to care for our son, she couldn't pay attention to him as much as before. He got upset, telling us that she was his girlfriend, and had a meltdown, which caused my son to start crying. When my wife got up to take our son to another room to calm him down, my nephew got up to follow, and his dad had to forcibly restrain him from following them. I stood up to block the hallway into the separate room just in case he got away from his dad. Once they calmed him down, they apologized for his behavior and said they would keep better tabs on him. Here's the part where I may be the asshole. I told my cousins I didn't feel comfortable with my nephew being so possessive of my wife, and I know for sure she didn't. Especially since he seemed to be so jealous of our son. I told them I couldn't allow their son in our home until he learned to control himself and understand that my wife was not his girlfriend. I apologized but asked them to get a hotel room for the rest of their stay and not to visit us again unless they left my nephew behind with people they could trust and knew would care for him, while they searched for jobs in our state. They didn't say anything but looked saddened and went to the guest room with their son to pack up their bags. I guess they must have told my extended family what happened because my paternal grandmother called me this afternoon, telling me that I should have been more understanding and that I was wrong to ask them to leave. Am I the asshole? Technically, my cousin is my second cousin. My dad is an only child, so the cousin I refer to in my post is the son of my own dad's first cousin. My paternal grandmother and his paternal grandfather were siblings. I'm not sure if this is correct, but his autistic son would technically be my third cousin. The reason I refer to him as my nephew is because he's the generation after mine in our family tree, and it's less of a mouthful to refer to him as cousin X removed. A lot of people have posted that it's not correct to refer to him as my nephew, but to be frank, I don't care. And my family's never followed this traditional genealogy nomenclature. Without being specific, in the Western state I was born and grew up in, it's not uncommon to refer to even close, unrelated adults as uncles or aunts. I call him my nephew because my cousin and I were close, and I still hope to have a close relationship with him if at all possible. Though I don't know how after this situation. Some have asked if I was jealous of my nephew calling my wife his GF. The first time, I thought it was amusing and was surprised that he had any romantic notions towards anyone, let alone my wife. Remember, in my mind he's my nephew, and I never thought of him as anything other than a large kid because of his developmental delays and normal, for him, childlike behavior. Regarding the situation that happened this weekend, I was only concerned for my wife and son's safety. I didn't know how he would react and followed my cousin's lead, but wasn't about to let him get near my wife and son once they left the room. I don't know what was said to my paternal grandmother, but I don't want to react in anger and want to talk to my cousin once we've both had time to process what happened and calmed down. I have been with my partner for 7 years. We initially met online, and after meeting in person a few times and realizing our affection for one another, we found it promising to move in together. I moved from California to Pennsylvania to be with him throughout graduate school. All was seemingly well during this time. I have never really had any reason to not trust him. I encouraged him to very much so, to try his best to make friends, or to explore hobbies on his own outside of the various ones we share, because I have my own passions. And I found we connected most when we met in the middle through conversations about these passions, through the act of explaining or showcasing what we've taken in or learned. Throughout these 7 years, he has struggled with very low self-esteem, and though I don't necessarily think of myself as the pillar of self-love, the depth of mine doesn't reach the low perception of his self-value. Because of this, he has seen and stopped seeing both a counselor and a therapist, and has been on medication to help for the last 6 months. Things were seemingly well between us, and continued to be pretty fluid. We continued to share things, and take long walks, and were pretty open-ended about where we stood in the relationship. If one was feeling a bit of an ebb, the other would pick up more of a share, and vice versa. However, things took a bit of a dip about 2 days ago when I felt the ebb and asked him about it. Initially, he said there was really nothing wrong. And perhaps I was just feeling this way because with our schedules we haven't been able to see one another for long periods of time like we are used to, which is true. But the feeling continued to irk me, and when I asked about it a second time, he confessed to me he had begun talking to another girl from another country via Instagram direct messages. And though things between she and him never crossed the boundaries of platonic friendship, he really loved the initial rush of someone asking him questions about his favorite movie, his favorite album, his favorite book. All things he and I already know very well about one another. I asked if he'd sent any selfies, or anything risque, and he said no, though I can't confirm, because he deleted the messages. A good deal of me believes him, because of how open he was about the initial conversations to begin with. We slept apart, and I just felt really confused the entire night, because I couldn't really resonate with wanting that sort of attention from someone else. If anything, his yearning for that type of attention sort of hurt. It felt like I wasn't doing enough, or giving enough. The next morning, though I don't have an Instagram, and am not on the app, I went to check his using the desktop version, and found that posts where he once called me the love of his life, or a specific post with a gift I gave him that once said, "Greatest gift from the greatest girl," were still on his profile, but the words, girlfriend, or love of my life, were completed erased. With this realization, my confusion and hurt turned to very real heartache. I called him and asked if he had deleted these words from the specific posts, and with shame, he said yes, he did. When I asked why, he said it was because he just didn't want the attention from the girl asking him about himself to be disrupted if she found out he was in a long-term relationship. I guess this is where I asked the obvious and questioned why someone who is just asking about your favorite books, movies, etc., would be driven away by the fact that you have a girlfriend. And he said he didn't know why he did it, and that it was a massive mistake. At the risk of seeming toxic, and I will take full accountability for seeming so or being so, I asked him to please deactivate his Instagram for the time being while we sort through this, his Twitter as well. He did, and though I was feeling a bit of relief about that, I couldn't help but feel a bit saddened that he didn't choose to do that on his own for the benefit of our relationship. He had to wait for me to ask. Which again, just made me feel like such a toxic and controlling partner. Two things I always strive to be so far from. When he got home from work, we discussed everything at massive length, and he continued to swear up and down that these conversations pertained strictly to music, movies, and books, and he didn't have interest in her. Just interest in the initial rush of the attention he was receiving. We read a few articles, and he broke things down to me as his self-esteem has never been lower. Despite his career as a doctor being at a high, and his finances in order, he felt things with his music weren't taking off. And with that came a feeling that he wasn't special, and it was nice for someone to make him feel that way. I felt shame and asked him if I wasn't doing enough or giving enough to him to make him feel that way. He said, I defiantly was. But my love, and attention and affection, became a pillar he could rely on, and got used to, so with new attention came a rush. And he liked that. I asked him if he wanted to be single, and find that rush in dating new people. And he kept insisting that that's so far from what he wants. He wants to remain a couple, and do all he can to work on these things together. Though I can't help but correlate that feeling he enjoys with the feeling of a first date. Which hurts, of course. I told him I didn't really see how we could move past this because there was nothing much for me to make an attempt to work on moving forward. This seems to be a self-stemming problem that I emphasize with, but just don't want to be on the receiving end of the counter effects. So though it is incredibly uneasy to begin to think of how difficult it'll be to begin again, it is just as difficult to think about how difficult it would be to stay and try to rebuild back up an issue that I feel like just a bystander. When it comes to this has all been very painful, and if this comes to an end I just want it to be as civil and as possible. He deserves to love himself, but not at the expense of the love we have between us. I deserve love that is stable and comforting, and not laced with newfound paranoia. Despite this all, my heart is still very much in this, of course, and he has been very vocal about how it was just one mistake. Nothing happened, we can work through this, etc. And I secretly keep hoping he will make a step, any step really, to showcase these words and implement action, seek a new therapist. Find the two of us a relationship counselor, buy a book on self-help or on how couple conquer affairs, anything at all. Without me having to be the one to ask him. I just want him to have that yearning that he continues to say he has, but instead of saying it, I was him to show me. That makes me irrational or just plain dumb. I believe to be in a state where I can handle either answer. Or something completely different just the same. Do all think I'm blowing something completely out of proportion? Given how this was an exchange of conversation between him and another girl for just a few days. And his erasure of me on his profile was only for about 2 days? This has been a first in this relationship, this has been a first in my life truthfully. I just felt completely vulnerable and isolated. My best friend and I are quarantining at our apartment together. She's trans and has had trouble growing her hair out, so she wears wigs. She has some really cute ones in other colors that she wears for fun and stuff. But she has a standard everyday wig she wears most of the time. Lola never got the traditional girly childhood, so we've been making one for her in quarantine. We built a fort in the living room, have been making friendship bracelets, playing summer camp-style games. It's a lot of fun. Last week, Lola mentioned to me that she wanted to start a quarantine diary so that she could document her experiences for future generations. I actually thought it was really cool, and then we got on the topic of journaling and I told her about my first diary. One of those flismy locked diaries that every girl had as a kid. We bought matching ones as part of our Give Lola Her Childhood Back crusade. They took a little while coming in, but we got them on Friday. Saturday night, some of our friends from college decided to do an impromptu girls' night in. Lola was in the shower, so I answered the Zoom without her. Lola is not out to anybody at our college, and I respect that. This is her fresh start, and she has a right to decide when she wants to come out to these people, if at all. I know I wouldn't 100% trust some of the people at our school with something as personal as this. We were talking about what we've been doing in quarantine, and I mentioned that we had gotten the diaries. I said it was for the nostalgia, and they wanted to see the diaries. We left the box in Lola's room, so I went in to show them. Lola and I go into each other's rooms all the time. We're basically sisters to one another, and it's just about second nature. When we were younger, we had keys to each other's houses. I didn't think anything of it. I flipped the camera to show the diaries and didn't flip it back. I got distracted by a cute choker on her dresser and forgot that the camera was flipped back / there was anything to hide. They knew Lola has worn wigs out to parties / the club / etc., but her everyday wig was right out in plain view, and one of our nosier friends asked what the new wig was. I completely blue-screened, and someone else realized that it was Lola's hair. I genuinely had nothing to say. They were asking why Lola wore a wig, and I had no explanation. I didn't want to out her. Someone else came to the conclusion that Lola must have cancer or alopecia or some other horrible thing that causes hair loss. They've decided that she was just too embarrassed to say, and they all started going on about poor Lola, etc. I just didn't know what to say, and I said it wasn't my place to confirm / deny. I hung up and immediately told Lola. I apologized profusely, and I know how badly I feel so guilty about it. But, understandably, she's upset. Now, she's being forced to decide whether or not to out herself. Lola, understandably, doesn't want to lie about having some serious disease, and people are already trying to show support. At the same time, though, she doesn't want to have to come out. I don't know what to do. I want to support her, but she doesn't want to even see me right now.